How about the greatest bicycle company ever? You remember Schwinn? Schwinn Bicycle Company? How many of you had a Schwinn growing up? Fantastic. In those old surveys of America's greatest brand names, number 1 and number 2 were Marlboro and Coca-Cola. Kind of interesting. Number 3 was Schwinn. That's the point. In fact, people used to joke, if your parents really loved you, you'd get a Schwinn. And if they didn't, you might get a Huffy. Which is something I'm still dealing with. But in any event, what happened to the Schwinn Bicycle Company? Well, if you're into biking, cycling, you might know some of this story. There's a guy named Gary Fisher who lived in Northern California, and he would go down hills on his bicycle with his friends, basically all day long. That's kind of what he did. The beginning of mountain biking, right? And so one day he's kind of walking down the street, and I will show you what he was doing. He was walking down the street, and he comes across a Schwinn bicycle frame that somebody had tossed out. Still solid bicycle frame. And by the way, this is a true story, as opposed to the other stories I'm telling you today. And he puts oversized tires onto the bicycle. I don't know where he got that creative spark. He put oversized tires on the bike, solid frame, going down hills with his friends, falling much less often because it's a more stable bike. And so his friends see him and they say, Gary, where'd you get the bike? And he says, I made it. And the next question is, and this is how maybe all entrepreneurs start at some level, could you make one for me? And he says, you know, he's thinking to himself, well, I go down hills all day long on my bike. I got a bit of spare time. Why not? I'll make one. And he makes 1, and he makes 5, and he makes 10. He's making hundreds. And somehow, Schwinn managers discover Gary Fisher in the very earliest days. So it's kind of interesting to think about. It's not that they didn't know about it. And they fly out to Northern California, 3 senior Schwinn managers in their suits and their ties, looking real sharp. And they see Gary. And here's Gary with long, long hair, smoking God knows what, bombing down hills all day long with his friends. What do you think the reaction was of the senior Schwinn managers when they saw Gary Fisher? Forget about it, right? Who is this guy? He'll never amount to anything. Which, by the way, some of you may know, the first time that British Airways executives met Richard Branson, they said the same thing. You know, you never want to judge a book by its cover, except for my own books. But in any event, is it a mistake? Is it a mistake not to jump into the mountain biking business as soon as you hear about it? Could be a fad, you can't be sure. So, you know, we're not going to criticize them for not jumping in right away. But you know what? 1 year goes by, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Major Schwinn competitors are now in the mountain biking business. 5, 6 years, 7 years after Schwinn managers first discovered Gary Fisher, they introduced the first Schwinn mountain bike. 7 years later, I mean, talk about response to competitive threat. You're going by seasons and by weeks sometimes, and you see what happened. And so, you know, so what's the net of all that? Well, you know, in 1992, after almost a century of family ownership, Schwinn Bicycle Company files for bankruptcy after huge successes, tremendous successes over a long period of time. And the reality is, you know, a lot of things happen. It's not just kind of the Gary Fisher story. There's a lot of other things. You know, they outsourced a lot of their production to Taiwan and to China and gave away the technology in the process. Obviously not a particularly clever move, and a few other things. But it gives you really a sense of the price that you pay. And by the way, if you see the Schwinn brand today, some of you maybe are doing spinning or have a Schwinn bike. If you see it today, it has nothing to do with the company. A group of investors acquired all of the trademarks, all of the assets out of bankruptcy court and have resurrected the Schwinn brand because it's such a fabulous brand. And you know, most people today who have a Schwinn might have some memory of a great brand from the past, but it has nothing to do with the people that built it and ran it and successfully built it over almost a century. So, you know, what's the lesson here? To me, the lesson is really, you know, it's about all of us, right? It's not that people are unable to change. It's that they're unwilling to change. And those two words are really important. You know, unable means, you know, you can't do it. You don't know what to do. You can't figure it out. Unwilling means you kind of know some of what's going on around you. You know how big digital is. You know about the changes that are going on in different industries, in different countries. But we think we're okay for now. We don't have to respond that quickly, or it might not apply to us, or some such mindset.